What's up, guys? Big Natural Stoney Keeley here, editor-in-chief at SoBrosNetwork.com, back for another week of football game picks. Football season's underway. It's week 3 of the SEC, week 2 in the NFL, and I'm going to call all the damn games straight up. Last week, I was 10-3 in the SEC because Vanderbilt fucked me over, and I was a little too optimistic about Arkansas going on the road and beating Ole Miss. That's okay. 10 out of 13 ain't bad. 13-3 in the NFL. I can't remember which games I got wrong. It doesn't matter. You put your losses in the background. Like a quarterback never remembers those interceptions. A football picker never forgets those losses. Quickly forgets those losses. What am I thinking? I don't know. Let's start with the SEC this week. I think it's another week that should be pretty easy to predict. I mean, you've got two games that figure to be competitive. Alabama at South Carolina. That is your CBS game of the week, taking off at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. And then at 6 p.m. on ESPN, we've got Florida at Kentucky. Outside of that, it looks like on paper it's going to be a bunch of cupcakes. I don't mean to twist the knife into Vols fans, but you never know. UTC visiting Tennessee and Knoxville. I don't know. I think there's also a pretty sneaky competitive game, Kansas State at Mississippi State at 11 a.m. Central Time. But all in all, I think this is a big cupcake week before we really dive into the meat of the SEC schedule. So let's call them straight up, those 11 o'clock games. Arkansas State's going to go to number 3 Georgia and just get their buttholes wallered out. Georgia Bulldogs win big. I think Mississippi State's going to handle business against Kansas State. Kansas State is 2-0. Kind of a surprise team, I guess, in college football, but Mississippi State at home should get the job done. I keep predicting a Vols win. It's bound to happen at some point, right? I mean, UTC, you never know, but I expect the Vols to get it done at home. You would think, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm having flashbacks thinking about, as a Tide fan, I'm having flashbacks thinking about South Carolina upsetting Alabama all those years ago. Alabama does have to go on the road to play this game. Like I said, that's 2:30 afternoon kickoff. I'm picking Alabama, but there's still a part of my brain that's just like, I'm seeing flashbacks there. Southeastern Louisiana going lose at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to start the season 2-1. Not something I predicted. Colorado State at Arkansas. Colorado State beat Arkansas last year. I think the Razorbacks get it done this year. I think they start the season 2-1, and I'm still holding on hope. I'm still fascinated by Chad Morris and what that offensive philosophy, the vision could become. Was a police siren. Yeah, that's the anthem of Hermitage, Tennessee, right there is the police siren. So I think the Razorbacks get this done. Auburn's hosting Kent State, boring, 6 p.m. kickoff. Auburn's going to roll. Florida at Kentucky. I think this is the game where we finally see the Gators flex as a national championship college football playoff contender. They're currently ranked number 9. I think they're going to go on the road and they're going to win big. Lamar going to lose to Texas A&M. These night games suck. I mean, you're watching Florida at Kentucky, right? That's all there is. Lamar's going to lose to Texas A&M. Northwestern State's going to lose at LSU. Southeastern Missouri State is going to lose at Missouri. This seems like a pretty easy week to call for the SEC. The NFL is always a little trickier to pick, but after 1 week, you don't really know who's legit, who's not, who just had a bad game, who's going to improve. So I often find that week 2 is just as tricky as week 1 to pick, if not trickier. Perfect example of that is the Thursday night game. Carolina's hosting Tampa Bay. I think Carolina's going to win this game. I don't know which of my predictions about that Panthers-Rams game was true. Are the Rams kind of taking a step back? Maybe the Panthers being competitive with them was a mark of both teams kind of being average this year. Or maybe the Panthers elevated their game to step up to the Rams. I don't know. It's tough to say, but One thing we know about this matchup is that the Bucs looked pretty terrible against the San Francisco 49ers. So with Jameis Winston prone to turnovers, the Panthers at home having one of the best weapons in the NFL in Christian McCaffrey, I think the Panthers take care of business. Cincinnati, another team that looked better than I was giving them credit for. Seattle's a good football team, and they were very competitive. They lost by 1 point to the Seattle Seahawks, a team that figures to be a contender in the NFC. They're hosting the San Francisco 49ers this week. As much as I want to give them a win, I know Jimmy Garoppolo didn't look that great in week 1. I'm still a believer that the 49ers are going to surprise some people in 2019. I think they go on the road and they pick up the win and start the season 2-0. Looking at that Los Angeles Chargers at the Detroit Lions matchup, it's another interesting case because we thought the Colts would be kind of bad without Andrew Luck. We thought the Cardinals would be pretty bad. I thought the Lions would be competitive. I thought they'd win that game against the Cardinals and show a lot of improvement from 2018. So these are two teams that are kind of hard to gauge after that week 1 performance. I still think the Chargers are a vastly superior team in terms of talent. So I think they go on the road and get the win. And they also start the season 2-0. The Minnesota Vikings really surprised me against the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons were my pick to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, but they got stomped. The Vikings just stomped a mud hole in them and walked it dry, if you're a fan of Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Green Bay Packers defense looked pretty impressive against a rather inept-looking Bears offense in week 1. Hosting the Vikings this week, I still have questions about whether or not that Matt LaFleur offense is going to take off. And after seeing the Vikings just run the damn ball down Atlanta's throats last week, I think they're going to do the same at Green Bay and start the season 2-0. Man, I got 3 2-0 teams so far. The Colts at the Titans, I'm going to write more about this matchup in detail on SoBrosNetwork.com. The spread is currently Titans -3. It looks like easy money after the Colts lost in week 1 and the Titans just dominated a Browns team that was supposed to go to the Super Bowl. All that stuff, all that offseason hype, completely deflated. I think this is kind of scary territory for the Titans. We saw them last season beat the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles in dramatic fashion, only to lose to the Buffalo Bills next week. I do think they beat the Colts, but I'm nervous about this one. Until you can prove that you're not going to be that team that we saw in 2018, I'm still going to be nervous about that. The Dolphins look like an outright shit show. They're hosting the Patriots. They're going to get blown out. The Buffalo Bills at the New York Giants. This is interesting because I don't know. The Bills did not come out and surprise the way I thought they would in week 1. I thought they would win against the Jets pretty comfortably. It took a pretty dramatic comeback to win that game. And the Giants were rather competitive with the Cowboys to start that game before ultimately losing pretty handily. So I think there's a chance that the Giants are better than we think they are. I think the Bills could be worse than I think they are. That said, I still like the Bills defense in this matchup. Seattle at Pittsburgh. The Steelers sure as shit looked inept on offense. Looked like they were missing those playmakers, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, that they lost in the offseason. They just couldn't get it together for anything against the Patriots. You don't know who's going to step up. James Washington, Dante Moncrief. They need somebody to do it. And I don't think the Seahawks are the team that they're going to find those guys with. So I think Seattle's going to go on the road and get the win. The Washington R-words surprised me in week 1. I thought this would be a pretty good defense. It looked like they were going to blow out the Eagles, a team that has Super Bowl aspirations in 2019, but they gave that lead up and ultimately lost the game. Dallas looks like one of the most complete teams in the NFL after that performance. Dak Prescott having one of the best quarterback performances of week 1. I like them to go on a pretty good run to start the season here, so I think they beat Washington. The Cardinals, as dramatic as that fourth quarter comeback was with Kyler Murray, I don't think they're going to fly across the country to the Baltimore Ravens and win that game. Baltimore looks good. I still think Baltimore is going to be a Super Bowl contender this year, and we saw that against the Dolphins. Are the Dolphins bad? Sure, but we saw that progress in the passing game with Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, these weapons of the Ravens offense, and Lamar Jackson being able to get the ball downfield to these guys, and that rushing attack is just something else. These Ravens are going to be good. Jacksonville at Houston. Bless Deshaun Watson's heart having to play behind that offensive line. They get Laramie Tunsil, and they're still putting Watson on his back. I mean, at this rate, by the time the Titans actually played the Texans, which could be the match for the AFC South by season's end, by the time they play him in December, Deshaun Watson's going to be in a full body cast. The Jaguars lose Nick Foles. I loved what Gardner Minshew did when he came in. I loved Gardner Minshew in college. When he was drafted late in the NFL draft this year, I took note of that, and I said, this is a guy that could develop into a nice quarterback. And he had one of the highest rated performances of week one, filling in for Foles. So we'll see whether or not he can sustain that, or whether he was the beneficiary of sort of catching a team off guard that maybe wasn't prepared for him. I don't know. I actually like the Jags in this matchup because of Minshew and because of that defense taking advantage of that shaky Texans offensive line. The Chiefs travel to Oakland to take on the Raiders. As much of a feel-good story as that Monday night win was for the Raiders, the Chiefs are a legit Super Bowl contender. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. Sammy Watkins had a big game in week one. Patrick Mahomes doing Patrick Mahomes things. They get LaShawn McCoy rushing the ball. Damian Williams has a touchdown. There's just so many weapons on this Chiefs offense that I don't think the Raiders have a defense that's going to slow them down. So Kansas City starts 2-0. Chicago traveling to Denver. Denver looked pretty bad against the Oakland Raiders on Monday night. The Chicago offense just couldn't get it clicking, and I think this is the week that they do it because Matt Nagy is just too creative a guy to not figure this sort of thing out. He was coach of the year for a reason, and I think he's going to sort this out week two. Then we've got the Saints traveling to the Rams. I've said that I think the Rams are going to come back down to earth a little bit this season. I think this is a game that the Saints win. Eagles at the Falcons on Sunday Night Football. The Eagles really looked good. Deshaun Jackson really looks good. And what concerns me about the Falcons is the amount of yardage they gave up against the run. So if the Eagles are able to run the ball, if the Falcons don't tighten that up, this could be another long game for that Falcons defense. I think they're going to get it done. I think they're going to right the ship here because of that offense. And then we got a pretty interesting, maybe it's just me being a football nerd, I think the Browns at the Jets is an interesting Monday Night Football game. And I actually think the Jets are going to win this game because the Browns' offensive line was a serious concern. And then it was just outright exposed against the Titans. So these are two teams that are kind of desperate not to fall to 0-2, and I think we're in for quite a show. It might not be the most entertaining football you've ever seen, but I think you're going to see there might not be two teams on this slate of games that are more desperate for a win than these two. I'm looking at it right now, and I mean, like, can you imagine after all the hype if the Browns fall to 0-2 to start the season? And likewise, what kind of meltdown is going to happen in New York if the Jets fall to 0-2? So that's drama to me. Again, I don't know. I don't know why. I like the Jets. Seeing the Browns fold the way that they did, how sloppy they played in week one. Like, I don't know. I just feel like they're not mentally equipped to win games yet, if that makes sense. So I'm going with the Jets. So those are my game picks for the upcoming weekend. Again, I should remind you, I'm not an expert. So don't fucking sue me if you bet on these games because I said so and lose money. We'll catch you next week.